North Carolina only played one game this week, and honestly, that might have helped. One game on the road against a team you're supposed to beat. And for once, Carolina didn't complicate it. They went into Atlanta, which has been a house of horrors in the past, and handled Georgia Tech 91-75 with control, ball security, and a freshman who continues to look more and more comfortable carrying weight. But tonight isn't just about what Carolina did on Saturday, it's about what that performance sets up. Because the next two games will tell us a lot more than Georgia Tech ever could. Syracuse Monday, Duke next Saturday. Tonight, we're breaking down what traveled, what still needs to prove itself, and whether Carolina is actually ready for what's coming down the road. Let's get into it. Good evening, all of you. Glad that you're here. This is the Coast to Coast podcast. I'm Joey Powell for Inside Carolina. We are delivered by Salvio's Pizza in Cary. IC20. IC20. Use that and you get 20% off any online orders. And hey, hats off to all of you guys who have been blowing Salvio's up and getting delivery from there. They really appreciate it. I'm grateful for y'all for supporting them. Just make sure you continue to do that. It's the best pie you're going to get anywhere. They deliver a fairly decent radius outside of Cary, but just make sure that you're checking them out. And even if you're trying to get out of your house in the next couple of days because you've been cooped up due to the weather, go by and see them. I promise you won't be upset that you did. I'm a big fan of the hot honey pepperoni. It's actually really, really good. You hear me say that and you're like, Joey, what are you talking about? I promise you, do it. You'll be glad you did. Salvio's owned and operated by big-time Carolina supporters. Those guys have been kind of out in the front of supporting NIL athletes at UNC before a lot of other folks did. So we just want you guys to show them the same love. Salvio's Pizza delivering this here coast to coast. Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran, fellas, you saw North Carolina play a game that they hadn't really done anything since they had the emotional high of winning in Charlottesville. And this felt like the typical trap game. You know how North Carolina's had issues in Atlanta in the past against much worse teams with much better teams. A road game, inferior opponent, week off, yada, yada. And instead, they actually held control from wire to wire. A couple of things to throw out. They scored 91 points on the road in conference. It's a big deal. 21 assists and 2 turnovers. That is historic level of ball security. But they never trailed after kind of the first minute or two, and they never really panicked. Do you guys feel like this is a team respecting the moment, or do you think they're actually getting better? Sherrell, I'll come to you first.
The $1 million question once again, Joey. You're starting us off strong. I think it's TBD. I don't mean to not answer your question, but honestly, I don't think we know either way. One thing is for sure, as you said, Atlanta is a house of horrors for UNC. So the fact that they went in there and handled business, I think the only time they trailed was 9-8, like you said, by 1 point, and then they just kind of cruised from there. I think that says a lot. Maybe it says more about Georgia Tech than UNC, but it still says something because we've seen much better UNC teams go in there against arguably worse Georgia Tech teams or equally worse Georgia Tech teams and struggle. So I take it as them doing what they need to do, which at times this year, I think maybe it's been, I don't say taken for granted, but they did that during that easy stretch of non-conference. It didn't always look the best, but you never worried that they would drop one of those games against an inferior opponent. And so I think right now have we seen an example of Carolina losing to someone who I guess Stanford and Cal count, but those were historic shooting nights. But generally, I think this team takes care of teams that aren't as talented or as good as them, as a whole. So I think really what it says is just they did what they were supposed to do. I'm not getting up about it. I'm not getting down about it. It's just they did what they need to do on Saturday, and then you move on.
Yeah, I think that's all fair, and I think that's stuff that probably a lot of folks listening or watching this are going to probably agree with, especially in spirit. Hey, if you're watching us on YouTube, I know there's like this angel aura ray spotting down in front of me. I'm not really sure what's going on with that, but I'll try to get it fixed before next show. But yes, I do know that it's happening. Sean, looking into how UNC played. It was more kind of a process rather than highlights, but there were a lot of highlights to be had. From a schematic standpoint, this felt like the cleanest game that North Carolina's played in a long time. What jumped out at you? Was it ball movement? Was it, was it the fact they were attacking Georgia Tech when Georgia Tech would help? Was it the fact they were playing through multiple creators instead of forcing isolation? What did you see that you felt like schematically was different and really showed off what North Carolina can do offensively? Sean, I can't hear you, dude. You were, I mean, the things you were saying were amazing. Sherrell, I don't know if you could hear him, but it seemed like he was just
How
really
about now?
launching into something. I still can't hear Sean. I'm not sure what's happened.
I got you now. I can hear you.
Anybody else? Joey?
Yeah, you're good now. Okay.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I feel like Georgia Tech. That was Georgia Tech right there. As what I was saying, second worst team in the ACC. So in terms of a big, it wasn't a big win, but in terms of schematics, I think there are a lot of takeaways. And to me, as I was rewatching that first half late last night, it almost felt like I was watching a different sport compared to what we had seen previously, both offensively and defensively. And I think, they could go into this week, 2 tough games, Syracuse at home, who they should beat, and then obviously Duke, who will be their first, I'd say, elite team that they play. But one, just the ball movement. So we've talked about that all summer, all year, but this was the first game where, to me, it was just everything was, it kind of built on last week to an extent. So everything was so crisp. First possession, went into Caleb, they doubled, fastball out of there. And then throughout the first half, they're starting to move. So Hubert Davis has talked about the 0.5. I think that game was the first one we've truly seen it consistently throughout the game. But also in terms of whether it was Dixon or Evans, whoever was playing point, I thought they did a good job of pushing the ball up the court. So they're getting into the half court pretty quickly. And then they're able to start with their focuses. Defensively continuing to switch, but with the last 2 games, there's been a purpose, there's been an intensity, there's been a lot more talking and communication. Even when there were situations where they did mess up or did have it botched, they were a lot more plugged into each other so that they could at least try to make up for it, because it seemed like it was 5 working as one on both sides. And once again, easier to do against Georgia Tech, but I do think it has been something that, whether it was a switch that flipped from that California trip, and then finally, not schematics, but you look at when they had assists, you finally have people pointing to each other, giving each other high fives, celebrating each other, showing emotion, other than when other people aren't scoring. And I think we didn't see a lot of that going into that Notre Dame game, but has definitely been something that has been commonplace throughout. So I think all those things, between pushing the ball, moving the ball quicker, making the right passes, the defense is talking and has a game plan. Those are all the things that caught my attention, that, once again, win or lose against Syracuse or Duke, unless they totally revert, I think are things that hopefully we'll continue to see. And last thought is, this was a totally new team. It does take time to gel. Did it take them going to ground zero of the Cal and Stanford to finally be able to start playing like we hope they could?
Yeah, there's something to that. A couple of things I want to point out, Sean, when you're talking about, the ball movement. I made a note during the game. There was a possession in the first half where North Carolina, I think, had 7 passes. All 5 players touched the ball, and it ended with a Caleb Wilson corner 3. And we've talked before about how good a Hubert Davis offense looks when the ball moves and doesn't stick. And that was just an example of, if sharing the ball gets you excited, then that specific play gave you the vapors.
Well, can I jump in and be Johnny Raincloud then?
Oh God, here we go.
The passing is good, but it's not good on the break. And Sean has been talking about that for, Lord knows, 8 years on here, however long we've been doing this. But I don't know, man. You can't fix it, because obviously they they got back from Atlanta late Saturday, and then I'm sure they just did like a walkthrough today, and then they have a game tomorrow. But like the passing in the half court, yeah, it's awesome. It's great. Caleb out of double teams, the ball swinging, but in the open court, it's like they forget that there are other people on the team. And that's not all terrible because you want guys to be aggressive, but I don't know, man. There were several opportunities where whether it was Wilson or Trimble or Luca, whoever was leading the break, just are not looking for their teammates. And I don't know that those times when they don't score in those situations, in bigger games against better opponents, those 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points are going to be the difference. And again, not to be a stickler, because there's not a lot to complain about from that game, but that is a trend that I think that continued over. We're talking about like, did they reset and how did they handle, the post California trip? A lot of things have gotten better. There's still some step in threes. There's still some open shots. There's still some miscommunication, but they've been limited, and it might be relative to competition. They've been limited to what they were. But I would say that negative has continued, even since then, of just like there's just so many opportunities for them to score in an open court and they don't do it. And the thing is, they're scoring great in the open court. So just think about how much better they could be with a pass or two or just widening their angles a little bit.
If you go back and think, this is a team that typically hasn't had as many transition opportunities as Hubert Davis or the squad, I think, once. They did have some of those opportunities against Virginia. They had more of them against Georgia Tech because Georgia Tech likes to push tempo a little bit. But I agree with you, Sherrell. I do think that you're not seeing the typical 3-on-2, 2-on-1 passing type like you would see in a drill, where I think the best one was Caleb Wilson with a really, really late pass to Seth Trimble on the break for a dunk. But you'd like to see more of those little pitch aheads, especially when they do have numbers. Sean?
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be something that does change like what we saw in the half court, just given, we've been saying it for a while. Once Seth gets the ball, it's hard for him to give it up on the break. Same thing to an extent with Luca, but I did like it. It was the first half. I'm blanking if it was Kine or Dixon, but you had Jaron streaking on the left side, and he did get hit once it got past half court and it got stripped, so it didn't result in anything. But I think with Jaron, the more he continues to run hard, I think some of the guys coming off the bench have been better passers on the break. But hopefully, this maybe sharing or camaraderie can extend itself to the fast break. But yeah, to Sherrell's point, there's a 3-on-2, 2-on-1 that we would hope to see passing the ball, moving the ball quicker, passing for the most part isn't a thing with a few guys, but it's not going to be fully fixed. But ideally, if people are running a little bit more and making it that obvious that you need to pass it to them, that maybe that can add some of those few points per game.
I think, especially if you go back and look and think about a couple of those breaks, if they didn't finish, then we'd really be bemoaning those possessions a whole lot more than we are right now. So I definitely think there's something to that. And hopefully, like you said, Sean, I don't think it gets fixed, but I do think there's probably some room for improvement. And maybe they do that more if they get more transition opportunities. Sherrell, how different does this squad look when they're playing with patience instead of kind of, I don't want to say lemon booty, but in a situation where they're just harried? I feel like this team looks so much more efficient when they're within themselves and when they're not, I don't know, when they're not doing these 30-second possessions and YOLOing a shot at the end of the clock.
If you go back to that first, well, I guess it was the second game of the season, the Kansas game in the Smith Center. I remember talking to someone close to UNC, and we were kind of like, "Well, what was the difference in the first half and the second half?" And they said a whole bunch of stuff, basketball stuff, but what it boiled down to was patience. They said that Carolina wasn't patient enough in their screening, their cutting, their passing against Kansas, and they were taking an average shot instead of working the ball, moving the ball, and working to get the better shot. Now, there was some other, I guess for me, more complicated basketball stuff like ball screen continuity, motion, offense with flair, all this other stuff that some of us are aware of, but only probably at a higher level. Sean can go deeper into it, but I think the difference really is just that it's just patience. It's just waiting for a good shot to happen. Defense is it's very difficult for most teams to play defense. It goes back to the Gene Chizik football theory, it's very difficult for an offense in football to drive down the field, in 14, 15, 16 plays. It's very difficult for a defense in basketball when the ball is swinging, when you're at past 6 or 7, to continually be ahead of the ball or ahead of the offense. So I think that's the difference is that they're patient. And then guys, even though they went 8 for 25 from three, when guys get open looks, and most of the time they're knocking him down. I would say that generally, there's a couple of players who are still struggling that you would hope they continue to improve. But when Caleb gets double teamed and guys start knocking down shots, that's one of the reasons that the offense has been really humming since the ACC started. In the conference only stats, which is just Carolina's performance against other ACC teams, they're second in offensive efficiency, and they're one of the best offenses in the country over the last month or so. So again, flipped from where it was, but I think it just comes down to patience, and then the fact that they have obviously Caleb Wilson and Henry Vasar, that can a Seth Trimble or Derek Dixon miss on a layup is almost like a layup because when the defense rotates over, you've got Dixon or you've got Vasar or Wilson kind of waiting. So it's a little bit of all that, but I think it all boils down to patience.
When you talk about that help side crash from Wilson and Vasar, it reminds me what we haven't seen in a while is a North Carolina team that just dunks at every opportunity. I don't think we've seen that, at least in a few years, even when they've had some really athletic players. You haven't seen guys finishing above the rim the way this squad does, which, as we're speaking about above the rim, I think it's going to go ahead and get us into our Caleb Wilson segment presented by Alex Swire-Clark. If you guys will bear with me a second, I want to read something for you. This is from an actual participant at one of Alex's presentations. Top 3 speaker in my 7 years of the organization, engaging, dramatic, in all the best ways, and funny. Not once did I look at my watch nor my phone. Those are pretty high words of praise about what Alex Swire-Clark can do for you. Since 1997, Alex has been providing dynamic tools for improving communications to audiences around the country. He's helped hundreds of organizations, including Make-A-Wish, Society for Human Resources Management, the Association of Executives of North Carolina, big-time organizations that rely on Alex to come in with his expertise and his way of presentation to help them improve communication and really engage audiences. If you were someone who sets up speakers for an organization or for your employer or for whatever, you need to give Alex a look. AlexSwire-Clark.com. Alex Swire-Clark. He's a multi-time award-winning speaker. He's a published author. Just guy brings a lot of wealth and knowledge, and his delivery style is something you're going to appreciate. Alex also is presenting this here Caleb Wilson segment. So hit Alex up, AlexSwire-Clark.com. And now let's talk about Caleb Wilson, because we continue to see stuff that I don't think human beings should be doing on the basketball court. Caleb was obviously hyped because he was playing back home, had a bunch of his family that you kept seeing on TV there as he was just playing out of his mind. But 22 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. He continues to not force the issue and recognize what the defense is giving him. I love what Rob Harrington said in the postgame with Tommy Ashley about Caleb Wilson really just kind of feeling things out in the first part of the game, and then he goes nuclear at the end of the first half. But Sean, a play that stood out to me, and I want you to talk about it because it's going to be important this week. There was a point in time where Georgia Tech goes zone in the first half. Caleb Wilson immediately creeps, and I use the word creep, not because I'm a Radiohead fan, but because he actually bent over and hunched himself to go to the soft spot of the zone, catch the ball, and immediately lobs it up for a high-low alley-oop to Henry Vasar. North Carolina is obviously going to see some zone from Syracuse. It's not the Syracuse zone that you're used to under Boeheim, but the fact that he is able to start recognizing these things and reacting to what the defense is doing to him, I feel like that's just such an additional level for this team. Do you feel like maybe now, Sean, that he's the guy that might even be setting the floor for North Carolina, not just the ceiling?
Good question at the end. In terms of that play in particular, I think we've seen going into this game the roles reverse of more Henry being the facilitator to Caleb. We've seen Caleb's passing ability throughout the year, but I think a lot of it was almost predetermined in terms of where it was going. But I think we've seen, to your point, him being able to react of is it a true double team coming, or are they just stunting? Do I have time to take 1 to 2 dribbles to get into the post, or if they are coming hard, how can I hit somebody in their shot pocket versus maybe a little bit off? I feel sometimes in the past maybe he was even too quick for some of his teammates, but I think especially with Syracuse, if they are going to play some of the zone, I mean, whether it's both of them in the game or one of them in the game, I mean, they need to get into that short little 12-foot range, because once they get the ball there, just between their Caleb's athleticism, both of their decision making and passing, that should be game over for those possessions in terms of what they're going to do, whether teams are dropping or doubling. So, the zone defense, UNC has the answers for that, especially of getting into the middle. In terms of Caleb continuing to impress, not just with his highlight dunks, but yeah, I think the passing, and to me, it went back to that very first possession. The double team came quickly. He got rid of it. But then you also saw maybe, I think it was a Seth Trimble 3, he was celebrating that pass, celebrating somebody else making the shot. And I think we're going to continue to see those assist numbers go up while him still finding his spots and being aggressive in that half court or transition type of style.
Sherrell, you've followed his recruitment really closely, and you've gotten to know some of the folks around him. As a guy who usually has a chip on his shoulder and doesn't require being motivated, do you think he had a little bit of extra juice in the crock pot yesterday because he was back home in front of his people?
Yeah, always. It's funny. I reached out to someone close to him, and they were like, "I told you this is what he was going to do, didn't I?" And I was like, "Yeah, you did. That's exactly what you said." Because again, coming into the season, we all were, utility defensive guy, and he'll get you 12 points on the break, but the offense isn't refined, et cetera, et cetera. And this person was like, y'all haven't seen, what I've seen, and we're more than halfway through. Well, we're more than halfway through the season, almost halfway through ACC play, and it's just been really phenomenal. And I think the point for me is that again, he continues to learn every time he sees something. And after he sees it once or twice, it's learned and he has mastered it and he moves on to the next thing. And I think the perfect example of that is the passing that Sean's talking about and the double teams that started coming inevitably once ACC play started. I'm leading the witnesses here, but who do you think on North Carolina's team has the highest assist rate in ACC play?
I know Caleb Wilson led the team in assists on Saturday. So, assuming this is the Caleb Wilson segment and assuming that you tipped your hand, I'm going to say it's Caleb Wilson. Sean, do you want to posit another name?
I will not go down that route.
Yeah, it's Caleb Wilson. His assist rate in conference games only is 22.3%, which is a little higher than Derek Dixon and Kai Evans. So your four-man is kind of being your lead facilitator, and it's because of how teams are playing them. The question is, can his teammates continue to hit some of these open shots, continue to make plays when they double team him? Because eventually it's kind of, how we always talk about how Carolina guards people. Like, do you want the other guys to beat you? Or are you going to say, okay, we'll let Caleb get his 35 and 20 and try to choke everything else off? And I think it's getting close to the point where teams are going to have to start making that decision because he's such a good passer. So to me, that's one of the things that is best about Caleb Wilson. Obviously, the athleticism, the dunks, the personality, the smooth offensive game, the rebounding, some of the steals, but the fact that he can see something and process it very quickly and then move on, I think is huge.
What I'm seeing now is a guy that has become, instead of just a scorer, he's become a connector. And I think that when you see the way he's able to, like you said, Sherrell and Sean, recognize things and react to them in multiple ways that kind of declaws the defense a little bit, it's incredibly important, which leads me to where I want to go next and talking about some of the supporting guys on this team. Watching that game Saturday, once again, Luka Bogovac is quietly becoming a steady scorer from North Carolina. I think he's starting to find his role inside the offense a little more. He's not forcing things. He still has a high volume of shooting, but I don't think they're not shots that you really regret seeing. Seth Trimble is now starting to really put some downhill pressure on defenses. Uh, Henry Vasar, like you guys talked about earlier, his efficiency on the interior is becoming something that has really started to be almost a given for this North Carolina team. And I'll be honest, I'm as tickled as a pig in a septic field watching it. But I think it really speaks to how much this team has developed with guys growing into their roles. That's something we've seen so many times. Sean, we talked about rotations in the last show. We're starting to see a little bit more what I guess is a matchup dependent situation for Hubert Davis. Kyan Evans and Jaden Young both getting about the same minutes. Um, but you're starting to see the guys who are getting the crunch time playing time and who is the closest, I guess, in the trust circle. Do you feel like that the contributions he's getting from these guys are due to the rotations, or do you feel like the rotations are dictating who's getting the playing time right now?
I think we've always said that the first half playing time for outside of your core group determines the second half. But I do think the last three games they've started Jaden Young. He's taken pretty much one shot, hasn't scored the past two. But I kind of like him starting, and then you're bringing both Luca and Jaren off the bench for Jaren in that 4-5, Luca, from that wing position. They're still getting now in that 27 to 28 minute time frame, which you probably would expect for them if they're starting, maybe a slight uptick more. But when you look at the whole game, they're getting those starter minutes. But now I don't know whether it's pressure coming off of them or getting to kind of ease into the game, or maybe just knowing their roles. I think both of them have fully become starters of sorts for Hubert, just in different situations, and especially for Luca, where if he's going straight up and straight down, catch and shoot, like I think it's going in based on what he's been doing lately. It's been the side steps and the followaways and some of the more challenging shots that he's taken over the course of his time here. But I think we would all love 6 for 10, a mix of twos and threes and 3 assists, no turnovers. I mean, that would be fantastic for UNC going forward. But even if it was a slight downtick from that, being able to count on him from a 3-point perspective, catch and shoot, he's a little tougher to guard than just your traditional catch and shoot because he will look to put it on the ground. But I think he's really, once again, this goes back to, is it maybe everybody just needed time to figure out their roles and identity? Not that it's perfect, but I do think now that's starting to come into play more from that clarity perspective. And I think fine with him not starting right now, but seeing that 27, 28 minutes playing under control is really important. And once again, takes the pressure off of that Wilson Henry duo. Same thing with Seth getting points in transition or slashing, but now you have somebody that you can count on from the 3-point line.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like they're getting starters minutes without starting. Excuse me. Big party foul on my part there. Sherelle, I want to ask you, and I hope you've known me long enough to understand what I mean when I ask this. Are guys producing more because they're more engaged, or are the guys more engaged because they're producing more? Because what I think you're seeing right now is literally, kind of the old adage that Tommy likes to use about rising tide raises all ships, and I think you're seeing that from every guys. You had the big game from Stevenson at Virginia. You've seen Bogovac now be a lot steadier. You saw Derek Dixon make some big plays against UVA. You're starting to see different guys carve out those roles that Sean was just talking about. What do you think is precipitating that? Is it figuring out of the roles? Is it one guy bringing the rest of his teammates up? How do you read that?
Yeah, to me, I think it's two things. I do think the Cal trip was rock bottom, and I think they all understood like, oh, this is not going to end well if we continue to play this way. If we continue with some of the things that we're doing, and I think too, what Sean said earlier is that it does take time with these kind of rosters because you're pulling so many disparate pieces from so many different places. Before it was just like maybe a transfer and a whole bunch of guys that you had last year and a couple of freshmen. Now it's like six transfers, a couple new freshmen, a guy from last year, a couple guys from overseas, and that does take time. And to me, as much of X's and O's and all that stuff is sure it's very important, but I think almost being like a coach who can create chemistry and a coach who can clearly define roles early is almost as important as just being X and O guy. Because I do think it's about roles now. Everybody kind of understands like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. And we talk about this every year. I think role definition is just so huge for a team. But yeah, like Luca, for example, it seems like he came in thinking like, oh, I'm the guy. Like I'm the guy that they're going to go to in the late shot clock situation. I'm going to have the ball in my hands, and that's not what this team particularly needs him to be. To be great or to be better. I think there's some of that with Seth. I think there's some of that with probably Kyle Evans. And as they learn and kind of recalibrate and figure out like who they are in this team, that's when you're starting to see some of the better play. I think Dixon was just more about honestly getting the opportunity to just fully be the point guard for an entire game or an entire stretch. So I think it's more about they're engaged because they're playing well, and I think they're playing well because the roles are finally clear and defined. And I agree with Sean too. I like Jaden Young kind of in the starting lineup as uh, not to never mind. I was going to equate it to somebody else, but I like him in the starting lineup because he's happy to be there. He's going to play hard. He might hit a shot or two maybe, and if he does, that's great.
It's
But then
found money.
then you're bringing two guys off the bench though who have started, I guess, the majority of the games for you this season. So you put him in there. You lean on the kind of the big three guys and Trimble, Wilson, and Vasar, and then you're bringing in two starters off the bench, and it just makes it a lot easier. One, I think, to get rid of some of those slow starts, and then two, so there's not such a gulf when you go to your bench because that was a big thing at the beginning of the
Mhm.
season was that Carolina would get a 10, 15, 20-point lead. They bring in three subs, and the lead would be down to six. And so now you don't quite have that problem. So it took some time, but I think they do have the right rotation. Now they just have to keep, playing well as they go into the toughest part of the schedule.
I can't remember who it was, but there was a team that Dean had in one of his last couple of teams that he started a guy, and I can't forgive me, somebody's going to be able to tell me in the chat, but he started a guy that like wasn't a starter, but played the first part of the game. He was a starter in name, but he didn't play starters minutes. And I feel like Hubert may have stumbled onto something like that with Jaden Young, for all the reasons you just listed, Sherrell. Um, so let's talk about what still needs to travel for this squad. I want to reset. Georgia Tech is not Syracuse. Georgia Tech is definitely not Duke. But what we've seen is that North Carolina still needs some defensive consistency. Their closeouts still have a way to go. They've got to continue to be efficient in the half-court offense when pace isn't there for them. And then this ball security trend that we've seen recently, will this hold up, when they start playing against some teams that are a little more aggressive or extend the perimeter for their defensive effort a little more? So, Sean, I want to ask you first, what of these recent, and I say recent, like since they got back from California, what of these performances the most likely to break against an elite opponent?
Most likely to the 21-2 assist to turnover ratio that won't carry, but I do think with Dixon in the lineup, his weak point, he could be pressured, which Cal and Stanford did pretty well. Duke will definitely try to do with their size and their aggressiveness, but I think they will all carry. I think it's more looking at each of these two teams. Syracuse has some really talented players on their team. Duke has obviously talent, but size. So in that game, it's going to be the offensive rebounding. And I think have been pretty high on Henry all year, but can he carry going against other bigs? Now, Syracuse, they have some size and some girth to them, but going against Duke's bigs will be a big question mark. So I do think a lot of what we have seen since the California trip will carry, just because I think this team has turned a corner in terms of that cohesiveness, playing together, understanding what they're supposed to be doing both offensively and defensively. But yeah, Syracuse, from a pure pure athlete perspective or pure skill perspective, much greater than Syracuse. And then, Duke, as we've talked about, is one of those elite teams in the country. But I think, hopefully we're not reverting back to defensively where they're not connected and they're just continuing to give up wide open threes. And I think that we've seen it each of the 3 games, even when they did get down to UVA, people talking, which was a rarity before. Also, whether it was something that the coaching staff has done or just more of a ownership of the players, I'm really curious, are they doing anything different from a scouting perspective? Because it does feel like the team knows a lot better what is to be expected when teams are running plays in the half court set, when teams are running plays out of bounds. Having that understanding, that comfort helps with the switching and that understanding of what your teammate's supposed to be doing. So, I think it all should carry. We'll see at what level it does, but I think just that connection that they've established together, should help them and carry going forward.
So I love that. I think it's a great question, and I think it's something that will it may not even be answered until postseason play. But I think you're onto something there, Sean. Sherrell, what about this team's moxie has yet to be tested? Because they've seen a bunch of different situations. They've played some different levels of opponents. They've played in some different environments. Help me understand what you think the next level for this team emotionally needs to be unlocked. Or I butchered that question. Help me understand what you think still needs to be addressed or tested emotionally for this squad.
I agree with Sean, kind of what he said about, the only team, the elite team they played is Michigan State, and that's been months ago. So I really want to see how they react to playing a team that is, I would say, more talented and more deep than them. Obviously, I have to get through Syracuse on Monday. That would be disastrous to kind of look forward to Duke on Saturday and then lose a game that's very losable. Syracuse is not great, but they do have some of the things that has hurt Carolina in the past, which are experienced guards who are athletic and can do some things between, Nate George and Kyan Anthony, and we've seen JJ Starling, really hurt Carolina in the past. So I think between those two things, moving forward towards Duke, it's just the sheer depth and the size. They haven't faced that in some time. So how do they handle that? How do they handle, Vasar getting 2 fouls in the first half, or Caleb getting 2 fouls in the first half, or both of them getting 2 fouls in in the first half. They've kind of been through everything else since then, where they've had an avalanche where a player was as hot as could be, where a team was as hot as could be, where they had to come back from down 16, where they had to lead up 16 and either lost or had to hold on. So they've been through most all of the stuff. Now I want to see how they handle that huge environment. They did it, great against Kansas in the second half at home against a pretty good team, but Duke is just at another level than Kansas. So curious to see how they handle it, especially some of the guys who I would say who have bit parts now, who are role players at this point. Kyan Evans to a degree, Luka Bogovac to a degree, Jaren. How do those guys handle the huge stage and the huge environment, of Carolina Duke? Because I think that's going to be the difference. You would expect Caleb and Boozer to kind of be a wash. You would expect, the centers to kind of be a wash, and then it's like, how do the other guys, Caleb Foster and Isaiah Evans and Nick Kamenia, how do those guys fare against Jaron Stevenson and Luka Bogovac and Derek Dixon?
Yeah.
To me, that's how the game will be played.
So hold
again,
off on
them
that a
against
little
elite
more. I'm
teams.
gonna get into Duke more a little bit later, but you did answer my question, so thank you. Something that I think something. God, I'm all over the place tonight. Snowbrain, boys. Something that I think folks probably shouldn't underestimate with these 2 home games is that there's 2 chances to go to Johnny T-shirt before the game. Um, it's been cold. I don't know if you have UNC snow bibs, but I'm going to assume Johnny T-shirt has that. If you need to get yourself something to wear the next time you're heading down the slopes in Carolina blue, I'm sure that Johnny T-shirt can outfit you appropriately. Want to make sure you guys show them some love. They've been supporting Inside Carolina and our show for a very, very long time. We're appreciative of them. We want you guys to appreciate them as well. use the code on the premium message boards if you're a premium subscriber. If you're not, okay, you can still join. I'm not sure what the deal is for February. I think the February deal is half off. Maybe forgive me for not having that, Ben. I'm sorry. I should have that up in front of me, but I don't. But use that code. You can go get the stuff from Johnny T-shirt and save some money. So I don't know where there's anything wrong with any of that. All of that feels like wins for everybody. And this time of year, we like to talk about wins. So wins, Johnny T-shirt, it all makes sense. Do it. Go check them out. And if you're at one of the games, go by and see them ahead of time. So let's look at the two teams that North Carolina has coming in this week. Syracuse, like Sherrell mentioned earlier, it's a quick turnaround. They will show you some zone looks. They'll disrupt your pace. They will force you into some shot discipline. I think something that you want to think about with this Syracuse squad. Under Adrian Autry, it's a little more of a hybrid and a matchup zone. It's not as rigid possession after possession 2-3 that you saw under Boeheim. They do mix their coverages a little bit more, and there will be some zone presses and they'll still try to top side pressure the ball. They'll still extend the wings. They'll still try to bait you into some skip passes. They just don't do it for 40 minutes the way you used to see from Jim Boeheim. So, Sean, as I'm thinking about what North Carolina did against the few times they saw zone against Georgia Tech, who may or may not have the personnel, I'm not going to get into that. What is Syracuse going to do to North Carolina to force them to be disciplined about offensively?
Well, I think it's going to go to working to get the good shots. I think if they're rushing to get the first shot that's open, I think that's what Syracuse will want, and then trying to shut them off the glass. To me, I'm very thankful this game is at home. If it was flip it from a home to road game, I think that could be tough, especially with the Duke game later on in the week. And once again, I think the team is pretty talented. You get to see a point guard that Carolina tried to get in the portal system. You see Starling, a very talented guard, King's a lights out shooter, and so they could almost be scouting for next year as well. But I think they just have to be disciplined, continuing to move the ball from an offensive perspective. And Henry is going to be key because he is going to have size. They're going to try to probably be a little aggressive, from William Kyle, at 230, try to push him around almost like St. Bonaventure to an extent. So to me, it's just continuing to what they did. They had a game plan. Hey, we know we've got two bigs that we need to feed down low, but let's make sure we're working the ball and getting good shots, and then attacking the glass. Because I think you can, they can be susceptible on the glass. UNC has been average, I'd say, offensive rebounding. I think they can still get in that 35 to 40% if they're focused on that. And then defensively, this is a game they just need to kind of take control early. Because once again, I think with some of these talented individual players, you don't want this to linger on into the late into the second half. So to me, it's just a lot of discipline in that offensively, trying to get the right shots by the right people.
So, Sherrell, what I'm hearing Sean say is this is going to be more about patience than it is about power. What say you?
I think that sounds right. I think for me, the offense, and every time I say this, it goes the other way. So, like, I think the offense will be fine just by the fact that they do have such a advantage talent wise. I would say in the post. Now, Donnie Freeman's actually a really good player. He's pretty athletic, and I think he's the type who could give Caleb, an issue. But nobody's really done it this year, so I don't expect it. But the fact that they have, the guard play that they have, and we've seen how UNC, even against guards who aren't great, they really have taken advantage of UNC off the dribble. And that is where Syracuse's guards kind of, I would say excel because they're not a great team, but that's kind of their strength, and that's where UNC is shown to be vulnerable. So it'd be really instructive to see if some of the issues that plagued them against SMU and Wake Forest and Cal and Stanford are fixed, or if it's just that they are playing. They played a couple of teams who maybe didn't have those type of guards because I don't. Virginia doesn't really, in my opinion. Um, you know, I would say they don't, in my opinion. And then obviously Georgia Tech, Reeves is good, but it just didn't have anyone who could really continuously threaten UNC. I would say off the dribble. And so you look at Syracuse. I mean, JJ Starling a couple years ago, I think him and Judah Mintz had like 40 points from just pull up jumpers at the elbow. I mean, excuse me, at the free throw line extended. So are we gonna see that again? Are they gonna be able to get into the paint? If they do get into the paint, how will the rotations work? And then if they do get into the paint and kick out, they're not a great 3-point shooting team. So will UNC giving them wide open shots that they make, or will they be more of the somewhat contested variety and keep them kind of at their season averages, which are not very good. So all that to say, I think Carolina's strength wins in the end. Caleb Wilson, Henry Vasar, and just kind of getting the ball inside and then working it around and using that movement, that patience to get them the ball.
Yeah, I think all of those things that you just laid out are quite possible and are the way the game should go if North Carolina is able to, I guess, dictate their tempo and impose their will. I guess is something that we say quite frequently. All right, well, the game Saturday. Now that College Game Day is going to be here, I know that North Carolina's fans always want to compare themselves to Duke, and for a long time, Duke's fans always want to compare themselves to North Carolina. It's just the nature of rivalry. This I feel like is kind of a truth serum game, but not necessarily in a sense that North Carolina has to win it. I think they have to complete cleanly. I think they need to. I think they need to show up, and I think they need to show that these games they've won recently in the softer part of the schedule have taught them something. Sean, Duke's going to test ball pressure, execution, and I hate to say this, but they're going to challenge North Carolina's toughness. From a basketball standpoint, what do you expect Duke to try to attack first?
Well, they're going to attack the guards. And once again, they have similar height advantage as they do last year. They don't have Nipple, raining threes down on you. But they do have the size. Excuse me. Interesting stat. I think UNC offensively, their 2-point percentage is the highest that it's been in the Ken Pom era, but Duke is at 63% from two. So they know how to get quality shots. Obviously, Boozer is very fundamental, and when they're missing, then they're going to attack the glass and use their bigs to try to create those second chance opportunities. Also, putting pressure on Wilson and Vasar from a foul perspective. So I think they're going to, on the offensive end, definitely test UNC's connection in terms of looking to make the extra passes, looking to get you in the blender and try to get those open shots. And then defensively, I think they're going to try to frustrate Wilson, especially when they do have Malik Brown in the game. This will be big for Henry. Can he match up with size against not Nagamba? Probably mispronounced his name, but from sophomore from Paulo 6. And then they're going to try to potentially post the guards or look to take advantage of that size advantage, especially if Jaden Young is starting or some of those other smaller guards are in there. So it's going to take a very smart and under control Tar Heel team that also knows how to pick its spots and can make runs when it's given the opportunities while knocking down shots. Because right now Duke has struggled from three, but they do have people that can get hot behind the arc.
I feel like for Duke, Isaiah Evans has been the X factor from when they've been a very meh team to have been a really, really good team. I would love to see Jaren Stevenson playing on him a lot against Duke. I'd love to see him frustrate him. He's got the athleticism to do it, and I think he has the measurables to do it. But, being able to and actually doing it remains to be seen, especially in a game of this magnitude. Sherrell, without throwing out any cliches, if you can do it without throwing out any cliches, I think North Carolina can beat Duke. I think this Duke team still has flaws. They are really good defensively. So I would ask you, what does a good game look like for North Carolina, regardless of an outcome?
Ooh, you got me in an entanglement there because it's in the situation now. They've lost 5 straight to Duke.
Have they?
So yeah.
Damn. Okay.
3 last year,
All right.
3 last year, and then 2 the year that they. No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. They've lost 3 straight. They lost 3 straight.
Okay.
3 last year.
Hater.
Yeah, 3 last year. My bad. My bad. So I think for me, it is about all the things Sean said. As much as it's going to pain Carolina fans, like you have to be able to compete with Duke, your chief rival. And last year they competed in spurts against Duke, but it was a situation where there were too many times where Duke kind of showed them who they were, after Carolina either got a lead or made a huge comeback. It never really felt like the Smith Center game. Duke got out to a really big lead. Carolina did what they did last year and made a huge comeback. And then you look at the final score, I think they still lost by 14 or 15. The ACC tournament, they were down by what, 22, 23 in the first half.
A lot.
So obviously, so obviously not getting down huge is a big key. But I think just playing competently and making it a game in the final 4 minutes, that is, I know people are going to get upset about that because that is a significant lowering of the bar for UNC against their chief rival. But where the teams are right now, you got to hope that Carolina is either up 3 or 4 or down 3 or 4 at the under 4 timeout. And then you kind of go from there and see what happens. Anything else than that, and it just further proves kind of the distance between the two programs at the moment. I do think Carolina can win the game. They're definitely talented enough. For me, I think somebody said it in the chat. Joey mentioned it, but to me, the key is Isaiah Evans. Like, are you going to get, Isaiah Evans who hit what 6 threes, I think against Florida State. He had another game where
in
he
like
hit,
one half. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. And he's had a few games where he's hit 4, or you're going to get the last couple of games where I don't think he made one their last game. He was like 1 of 7 or 1 of 8 against Louisville, I believe. Which player are you going to get? Because that's a huge part of what they do. Obviously, just expect Cam Boozer to have his 25 and 12 or whatever he's going to have, and then figure it out from there. So what I do like from a defensive standpoint, though, I don't know that Duke has the guards who have that ability to get past UNC consistently, like we've seen. That could be famous last words or knocking on wood, but that's not quite their game. They're strong and powerful, and they take advantage of their opponents that way. Maybe not quite from a sheer shiftiness and athleticism point of view of getting downhill. So that is a positive for UNC, but Duke's strength is Carolina's strength, and Duke has a little more depth than UNC. Whereas Carolina, after Caleb and Henry, you go to Jaren, Duke goes from their 2 guys to Hamidia can play some in the post, even though he's a little slight. And they also have Brown, who's still there and a great defender. So it's just, can Carolina's stars, be the guys that you expect them to be, and then can someone else break out?
Oh man, I'm already starting to try to figure out which way this game's going to go. And I know, like you, Sherrell, I'll vacillate 30 different times this week, especially after once the Syracuse game is over with. So let's try to get some final thoughts in here. I guess we can before we wrap up. Sherrell, what do you think this past week and this coming week will say about North Carolina's confidence and their cohesion?
Oh, a ton, because either way, so say they win both games, right? That says a ton about their confidence and cohesion. If they, lose, let's say they win Monday, they lose to Duke, and then I believe they go to Miami after that. Let me check the schedule, make sure I'm right. Terrible radio, checking the schedule while I'm supposed to be talking to Joey and Sean.
That's while you're doing that, I will say that
it
is
is
the first time.
It is Miami.
I will say for the first time, Salvio's is in the chat. I've never had a sponsor be in the chat of a game, but Salvio's is in the chat. So shout out to those guys. Go ahead, Sherrell.
There we go. Yes, and I was incorrect. They will, if Duke sweeps them this year, it'll be 5 straight. It's 3 straight right now. But I think it'll say a lot, because if you beat Duke, you're going to be sky high, and you have to go to Miami and play a team that is a talented team, let's put it that way. And if you lose against Duke, then you've got to pick yourself up off the mat and try to find a way to go down there and get a win, because it still will be a Q1 win. So I think either way, you'll learn a lot. And to me, it's not as much about the Duke game, it's about the Miami game, because we know that everybody's going to be on, have their best game or be hyped up and ready to go against Duke. How you react a few days later tells me more about the team, the cohesion, the chemistry, because it's easy to get up for Duke. It's easy to play, like your hair's on fire against Duke and be a great teammate and everything like that. To me, Miami is the one where I'll learn the most about UNC.
That's fair. Sean, I want to ask you, what does it say for North Carolina schematically this week if they're able to win both games, or if they're able to just look good in both games, independent of outcome?
Well, I think first and foremost, you need to take care of Syracuse. That just sets the week on a good mark. And then the game on Saturday is going to be tough, and UNC will basically need to do what they did against Kansas in the second half or UVA in the second half for maybe not 40 minutes, but 35. And the crowd is going to be loud and into it. And I feel last year Duke was able to, just with their methodicalness and their precision, take the crowd out of it very quickly. And then UNC is just trying to get back, but they don't have the horses to overcome it. And that's the fear for this game. But I think if that's where you need the 3-point shooting. I've always talked, 8 threes, which they did last game at a low percentage, but you probably need 10 in this game with Luka and Dixon and the guys hitting consistently like they did against UVA. And then you need Jaren coming off the bench playing. You don't need him to go for 15, but you need him getting rebounds. So they're going to have to play their best game, just given, even if Duke struggles from 3, they have one of the best players in the country in Boozer. They have a lot of depth where they're going to, Foster gets going. I feel he gets a lot of confidence if he makes that first basket, especially against UNC. He could be a problem. So from a schematic perspective, it's really just trying to control the game a little bit more versus losing the crowd, losing the momentum early on. And then at the same time, Duke has to, look at who they started last week. If they have Kamania starting, okay, are they going to try to double Wilson off the bat? Or are they going to have Boozer guard Wilson? I think, vice versa, Wilson could take advantage of that, somebody that doesn't want to get foul trouble either. So Duke is going to have to match up with Carolina in certain ways, but UNC just needs to play smart and consistent to make sure that they're able to control the game, almost like 2 years ago when you had Harrison Ingram and some of the others that stood out and kept it going, despite all the runs that Duke was trying to throw at them in that second half.
Certainly going to be a heck of a week. And look, I am grateful for all of y'all that decided to join us tonight. I hope that everybody's staying safe. I hope you've enjoyed. If you've gotten some snow, I hope you haven't lost power. I hope that, if you got kids, they've been able to go out and cover themselves in it. But just grateful for everybody for being a part of the show tonight. Again, shout out to Salvios for not only delivering the show, but for being in the chat. I love that. But there's definitely going to be plenty to discuss as we have this show next Sunday. So grateful for all of y'all. Want to make sure I mention our guy Munch Williams. Want to thank him for sending us a copy of his new book. It's called Here Are the Answers, Roadmap for Navigating Success in the Business of Youth Basketball. So shout out to Munch for sending all 3 of us a copy of that. I'm looking forward to digging into it in the next couple of days here. But appreciate all y'all for being on the show, being a part of the show, giving your comments. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe, like us as well. That'd be fun. But until next time, this past week, Georgia Tech didn't tell us everything, but it did tell us something. Carolina can play clean and they can play connected. Now comes the part where we find out if that version shows up when it actually needs to. For Sherrell McMillan, for Sean Moran, I'm Joey Powell. This has been the Coast to Coast on InsideCarolina.com. Y'all make it a great week.